Hi and welcome to my Thursday video. My name is Amanda and I am the founder of Story and Stone. If you're a new viewer, I would like to say thank you very much for clicking on my video and welcome. I hope you like the video. If you're a if you're a returning subscriber, then I want to say thank you for coming back. I really appreciate any support that you give me. So, this is going to be the first of my long form video on this channel. I wanted to talk about one of my stories and how I changed it and attracted my husband into my life. Attracting a husband wasn't actually my intention. It was just a byproduct of changing my story and my belief system. I decided to talk about this particular story because often people come to see me and they want to know about their romantic relationships and or their self-esteem, although they very rarely word it like that. And this story has a bit of both within it. Can I say right off the bat, you will never attract the right partner into your life until you are happy and in love with yourself. This is the magic elixir. It's only when you find yourself not worried about having a partner that you will have one coming and knocking on your door. I grew up in an era where whilst women were becoming more independent, more in charge of their lives, it was still the ultimate goal for a lot of girls my age to find a husband and settle down. Maybe not just as quickly as their mothers and their grandmothers. We wanted to have a little bit of fun first. It was the 80s. Who didn't want to dance all night in a balloon skirt and stilettos? But seriously, we were one of the first generations to be part of that transition age where new societal values were slowly taking over the old societal values. In fact, all these years later, we are still in that transition. But that's a story for another time. The story I'm going to tell you now, I have actually put up on my website if you want to have a read. And I just want you to remember that it's my original story started at birth, unwittingly created by my mum. How was she to know that her experience would affect me well into my 40s? We didn't understand about energy back then and how it caused trauma in the people around us, especially babies and little children who soak up energy like a sponge. It is a lesson that I've tried to heed when I'm with my nieces and nephews. Not to say that to them the things that were said to me that stuck with me when I was young, that made me behave in certain ways that were not always in alignment with my authentic self. So, here goes my story about changing a story that told me I was unlovable and unworthy to one that told me I was love personified and worthy of all the goddess's sweet gifts. So how did I get here? I thought it would be easier to answer this question than it is. I look on other websites and the founders have these inspirational stories about trials and tribulations that they went through, that inspired them to start their businesses. They're all so inspiring. My story feels almost too gritty to tell, and there is a lot that most members of my family wouldn't even know because even though I look like I'm an open book, there still is a lot that lies hidden. But I'm not going to go into those gritty details here. Anyway, here it goes. I was the eldest of 5. I am the eldest of 5. I have 3 sisters and a brother. I was born in 1969 and apparently my grandfather named me. From the story I remember, I don't think my parents had much choice. It was declared that I would be named Amanda Jacqueline after my grandfather Jack. I was the first grandchild in our little family. My name means worthy to be loved. If only my parents had known what my journey was to entail with a name like that, they might have insisted that I be called something like Joy or Felicia, meaning happy. But Amanda it was to be. Obviously, the powers that be were making sure I understood the lesson that I was to learn in this lifetime. Growing up in a small coastal town in New South Wales, Australia, I always felt like the odd one out. Although to look at me, you wouldn't have thought that those were the thoughts going through my head. I was your prime example of a good girl. I only talked when spoken to, I was diligent with my study, I wasn't running amok or pushing boundaries. I stayed in my lane because I was fearful of what might happen if I tried to change lanes. Now, it wasn't that my parents were strict or ruled with an iron fist. My home was pretty laid back when I think about how some other kids had it at home. I just had this fear that if I behaved how I wanted to behave, I wouldn't be accepted. One of my biggest fears as a child was losing one or both of my parents. Now, I know this is a common fear for kids, but my fear was so extreme that I often felt anxious if I went out for a sleepover or was away from my parents for a while. People most probably thought that I was a homebody, but I was actually just terrified that I would get home and my parents would have moved or disappeared. I really had this huge fear of being abandoned. As I got older and I started high school, I realized that I really didn't fit in. I loved learning, but I hated school. The subjects we studied were so bloody boring, and what I wanted to study was frowned upon. Even in my teens, I was interested in the esoterical. It wasn't something they offered as a HSC subject. As a result, my grades slipped, and I really only stayed in school because I didn't want to have to find a job, which is what my parents were threatening me with. And it wasn't about the kids either. My fellow students were great, and I'm friends with many of them on Facebook. But I just felt like I didn't fit into any of the stereotypical groups of the 80s. You know, the cool group, who were always usually the sportos as well. The straighty 180s, who were studious and a little bit nerdy. The druggos, name says it all. And all the other groups that we had in high school. From my point of view, I think I was classed as a straighty 180. I was pretty nerdy because I was so interested in learning, but I was not studious or particularly worried about my test results. One of the things that made me feel like I didn't belong was that I saw things before they happened, and I could see things that no one else could see, like people that weren't physically there. I was quite young when I realized that other kids didn't see what I saw. And I remember one day talking to Mum about it, and she told me I was just imagining it. I always felt restless and like I wasn't good enough, although I don't ever remember being told that specifically as a child. Fast forward to just out of high school and I get my first serious boyfriend. Wow, what an experience. He was an absolute arse, to put it mildly. It was a relationship filled with domestic violence, control, manipulation, cheating, and fear, lots of fear. I'm not going to go into details, but it put me into shock. I went from a teenager dreaming of a movie romance to being in fear for my life. I've processed that trauma from that relationship, but even some 37 years later, I still can sometimes feel that fear in the pit of my stomach. This relationship was just the beginning of a string of abusive relationships. Mostly they were emotional and mental abuse, which I think in my experience have left the biggest scars. Every partner I had cheated on me, took advantage of me, abandoned me, and in some way screwed with me. By the time I turned 40, I'd had enough. My last relationship was the final straw, and it wasn't that my partner was turning out to be the same guy I'd dated before. It was the fact that I'd just turned 40 and my life was shit. I didn't have any of the milestones that some of my friends had. No wedding, no babies, no home of my own. Just broken promises made by some man who was making no secret of the fact that he was sleeping with other women. It was that relationship that sent me into a spiral of depression and anxiety, and the universe decided to really let me have it. In the space of 3 weeks, I lost my relationship, my job, my home, I crashed my car, my grandmother died, and a close family friend passed away well before her time. I was at rock bottom, and I didn't think this time I could get myself out of that hole. I remember every night asking God to just take me, that everyone would be better off without me. but God had other plans for me. When I could finally think straight, I made a pact with myself that I would not have another relationship until I could fall in love with myself again. I wanted to be happy for the sake of being happy, not because I had some person in my life. So for 5 years, I worked on my trauma. Shit, there was a lot. I wanted to know why I attracted these kind of people into my life, because it wasn't just my boyfriends that treated me this way, it was my friends as well. I seemed to be everybody's fall guy, the person who got screwed when things got tough, and I was fucking sick of it. Why did I always get abandoned? Why did I always feel like I had to prove that I was lovable? It was only when I had a conversation with my mum one night that I found the cause of my abandonment and lovability issues. My mum told me that when she went into labour with me, that she was never told what would actually happen during labour. Now we have to remember that it was the 60s. Dad wasn't allowed in the room with mum. My grandmother and the doctor had never explained to mum about the excruciating pain she was about to experience. So it was no surprise that when my mother first saw me, she did not feel that first flush of love, but rather saw me as something to blame for her harrowing experience. It took my mum a while to fall in love with me. Whilst I was shocked to hear this story, it made perfect sense to me why I would have all these abandonment and lovability fears. You see, even as a newborn, we take in the energy around us. I worked out that it was also why I took on the role of being the good girl so readily. I just wanted to be loved. Because of this, I spent the first part of my life attracting that energy to me, hence all the dumbass boyfriends. In that 5 years, I devoted much of my time to rewriting my story and changing my beliefs to be in line with who I wanted to be back then. It wasn't easy. Those stories were well read, and many older members of my family did not want to give those stories up. Even now in my 50s, I can feel the pull of some of those stories, especially now that my mum has passed. Anyway, I got there. I changed my stories, I updated my beliefs, and I was happy for the first time for the sake of being happy. Then, wouldn't you know it, the universe sends me my husband. My husband is the first man I've been with who has never said one derogative remark about my body. He tells me I'm beautiful, even when I'm getting prepped for surgery and I've got one of those ugly shower caps on. And rather than our marriage being about me giving and him taking, it's a fairly even spread. He has stuck by me even in the midst of some of my darkest days, when my endometriosis was out of control, when I lost another job, when my stepdad got sick, when my grandfather died, and when my mum died last year. He has been there through it all. We're not perfect, and we argue, and we have our moments, but at the core of it, he's a really good guy. So that is just one of my stories. We have many stories that we've been given by our parents and other family members, by society and peers, usually from childhood, that really for the most part don't represent who we are now. And all of these stories come with beliefs attached to them about who we are, what we stand for, and how we see life. Many of these beliefs come from our family. When you're little, you just do, say, and believe what your family does, says, and believes. It's how we survive. It's how we develop our root chakra, the chakra associated with survival and living within a tribe and the tribe mentality. It is only when we get older and we start to develop our sacral chakra and our solar plexus chakra that we start to experience things that are different from what we've been shown. This is when we start to question the status quo. Some of us will push through those barriers and develop different beliefs from that of our family. But some of us will stay where we are, not wanting to unbalance the role that we hold within the family. This can take years and years, sometimes even into your 40s. This is a continual evolution. We are forever changing and upgrading our stories because we are continually changing and upgrading who we are with each lesson we learn and each experience we have. This year, I'm working on changing my beliefs and stories about my body. My poor body that has been ravaged by endometriosis and inflammation. My body that has been abused because it won't do what I want it to do. This year, I want to change my story to one of love and compassion, to one of admiration for my body and gratitude for all it has done for me, even when I didn't love it. Well, that's it for this week's video. If you have any questions, please leave a comment or contact me via my website, which is www.storyandstone.com.au. I hope that you've enjoyed my first week in this new format. I would really appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, comment, and share. It really helps me share my videos with more people. Thank you if you've already done this. Enjoy the rest of your day and evening. I will see you in the next video. Bye.